real? Hi, everybody. We have been having some tremendous technical difficulties this morning, so please bear with us. I just realized that it's a little on the windy side out there, so that might have something to do with it. It also just might be our typically sluggish internet, or we've been visited by internet squirrels. We're not entirely sure, but we sincerely apologize if you see some weird pixelation or the picture isn't as fabulous as it could be. Our internet is not the best. So anyway, we're so glad you guys were able to hook up with us here on a Friday for a live tutorial. This is something a lot of you have been asking to see for quite a while. So we thought we would do it live. We've picked out some variegated yarn. Now I'm going to say right up front, you don't need variegated yarn for this, but this is a great opportunity to use up the variegated yarn in your collection. We're going to be making these, if you haven't already guessed, a bunch of really pretty double-stranded granny squares. So mixing up a couple of variegated patterns looks gorgeous. And of course, they can just take on so many different looks depending on the kind of yarn you use and the colors you pair them up with. We're going to talk about how to pair up your colors. We're going to talk about tying in a ball if you run out, and just basically all the different kind of looks you can get by using 2 strands to make a double-stranded granny square. A little while ago, I'm just going to move some stuff around here. A little while ago, I made this blanket. It's a simple granny square blanket. Each granny square is only 5 rows, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make a 5-row granny. And the whole thing is made using 2 strands of yarn held together. And I used up all those little itty bits of scrap yarn. So whatever little lengths of yarn I had left over, I separated them into 2 piles, lights and brights on one side, darks and bolds on the other. And I always paired a light bright and a dark bold together. So as one would run out, I'd tie in one from the same pile. So this is sort of a way to get that really rich color, sort of ultimate colorful look in your granny square. And like I said, these are only 5 rows, but we're using a big hook and 2 strands together of a medium size 4 yarn. So they build up really quickly, and each of these is around 8 to 8.5 inches, which is 20 to 21.25 centimeters across. And that's before blocking. So once you get them all together and you block your blanket, they get even larger. And you can mix solids, variegated and solid. And you can just go crazy because no combination of color seems to not work out. They all work out so beautifully. So I love this blanket. It's a little lap blanket, 72.5 centimeters square. I think that's, what is that, around 29, 30 inches. So it's a nice little blanket to throw over your lap, especially if you're sitting in a chair or maybe even in a wheelchair. It's not going to tangle up in your feet, but it's nice and warm because it's double thickness. So that's what we're going to do today. And I absolutely love this blanket so much. It's one of the prettiest ones I think I've ever made. So we have picked a couple of pretty variegated yarns with the help from the family this week. And we're going to use, this is a dark.
Number 3, wasn't it?
That was number 3. Yeah, this was option number 3. This is what I would consider a dark or a bold, and this is a light or a bright. And I like this pair together because they both have some blue in it. And I think these are going to look really nice. So I'm just going to find the ends of my 2 balls here to get started. This one's hiding on me. So if anybody has questions about the granny square as we go, please feel free to ask them in the chat, or if you catch up with this video after it's become so I should say, if you catch up with this live stream after it's become a regular video later, then feel free to leave your questions in the comment section. And I am going to make an absolute mess of this ball of yarn here.
Okay, so guys, the chat's coming in kind of funny. It's sort of pausing for long periods of time and then shooting in all at once. So obviously we're having internet connection issues. So I'm going to try my best to get to questions here. First of all, we have a super chat that just popped up from Al.
Yay! Hey, How's it going? Thank
And
you.
Elle says, can we get a foundation stitch video? Mine is, and I think that's a poop emoji.
Sort of like a single crochet foundation chain or a half double crochet. Absolutely, we can totally do that. Sorry guys, I'm just fiddling with my yarn here. It's just a bit. There we go. Okay, I've got an end now.
Okay, I think the chat is working properly now. Seems to be coming in at normal speed again.
All right, just before we get started, so now I've got my two balls. One of them is going to bounce around. I think I'll just actually put this on in the bowl on the floor, just so it's out of the way here.
We have another super chat that came through.
Oh my gosh.
From Emily.
Hi, Emily. Thank you.
Emily says, thank you so much for giving my brain a break. My dog started chemo Wednesday, and I really needed one of your videos to cheer me up and get in a...
Aww.
Thank you, Jayda. I'm excited for this.
Oh my gosh. I hope Puppy feels better soon.
Yeah.
Poor thing.
Aww.
Oh my gosh. Okay. On that note, we're going to get into it here. I'm using a couple of acrylic yarns.
We had a question about the hook size.
Sure.
What's the hook size?
So we're going to use an 8mm hook. If you don't have an 8, you can use a 9mm or a 10mm. So what you want essentially is a pretty large hook. And of course, because we're making granny squares, you can really fiddle with the hook size here. So it doesn't have to be exactly what I'm using, but if you want a looser, a granny square with some ease or a bit of looseness, you larger hook. If you want it to be tighter and more stiff, you want a smaller hook size. So I'm using an 8. I'm using 2 strands of acrylic size 4 in variegated yarn colors. And you can use cotton, you can use any fiber you want to make a granny square, but if you're making it for a project, be sure to use the same fiber content throughout so that you avoid issues when it comes time to washing. You also want to have a yarn needle with a big eye that you can grab both yarn ends and pull it through your stitches later, and a pair of scissors. I've also got a little measuring tape here. You don't really need this, but I was just going to demonstrate sort of how big these are. And like I said, these are 8 inches across, or about 20 centimeters before they're blocked or sewn together. And these will have a little bit of give. So they're a pretty big square, and they work up nice and quick. I'm just going to put this little guy aside. I'm going to put aside my scissors and my yarn needle. And we're going to start with a slip knot, and we're going to make a chained ring. So I know a lot of you kind of get hung up with the slip or the cinch circle. You can, of course, use that if you want to start your granny square with a really tight center, but you don't need to. So we're going to start with a slip knot. You're going to hold both of those strands together, and you're going to treat them like they're one strand throughout. So hold them both together. If you've never worked with multiple strands before or a bigger hook, just relax, take your time, loosen up your grip and your wrists because it might take a little bit of getting used to. We're going to chain 5. Nice and easy. We're not going to make these tight. We're going to try and keep them nice and loose. Once you have a chain of 5, you're going to join your hook through the first chain you made and slip stitch, so that you've got a nice big ring into which we're going to work row 1 of our granny square. I'm going to work over top of my little short tails, but if that's too complicated for you, just let them hang. You can weave them in later. That's no big deal. Row 1, and every row of a granny begins with chain 3. So we're going to work 3 chains. The chain 3 in a granny square, at least this pattern, counts as a double crochet. So every chain 3 that begins a row counts as a double crochet. And we're going to work our stitches into this big ring. So we're using the double crochet stitch. We're going to double crochet twice into the ring to begin our first shell. Remember that you want to try and grab both strands of yarn as you work. Try not to miss any, but if you do, so let's say you accidentally only grab one of the strands and the other one hangs back for a second, don't worry, it's not going to unravel on you. So just pick it up and keep going. But don't worry if you accidentally drop one strand, it's not going to come undone. So a chain 3 and 2 double crochet is a shell. A shell equals 3 double crochet worked into any stitch or any space. So 3 shells or 3 3 double crochets equals 1 shell. We're going to chain 2. Chain 2 makes a nice corner space, and when you're working with thick yarn especially, so because we're doing 2 strands held together, it's really helpful to have a nice big space to work into in the corner. And then we're going to work another shell. So 3 double crochet into that ring. I already like the way this yarn is starting to color up together.
We have a new member that joined.
Ta-da!
Welcome, Wraith.
Hi, Wraith.
Rhiannon. Wraith Rhiannon.
That's awesome. Thank you. Welcome to the family. We're going to chain 2 more after our 3 double crochets. So that's shell number 2. So chain 2, that makes another little corner. I'm still working over my short tails. We're still working into that big circle. And we're going to work 3 more double crochet.
We have another super chat from Elle.
Hi, bunny mummy.
And Elle says, making another secret project.
Ooh.
A mini crochet thread TARDIS, chibi size.
Oh my gosh.
Any suggestions for the roof?
For the roof. Oh.
For the roof of the TARDIS?
Gosh. Yeah, because it's kind of like a square conical shape, sort of, isn't it? I don't know. I'd have to think.
Gonna have to think about that.
There's a challenge for the brain. Okay, so far we've got 3 double crochet, which equals a shell, and one of those double crochet to begin was a chain 3. Chain 2 for a corner, 3 more double crochet, chain 2 for a corner, 3 more double crochet, chain 2 for a corner. We're gonna work our last shell into the same ring. That's 3 double crochet. That's the 4th shell. There's only 4 shells in row 1. Every row increases by 4 shells or 16 double crochet. So however you want to count it. I find it easier to count the shells because they're easy to spot groupings. So once you've worked your last 3 double crochet, you're going to chain 2 more. And you're going to find the top of that chain 3. So that chain 3 we began with, find the top of it, stick your hook in there, and slip stitch to join. So I'm just going to pull up on my hook. What I like to do after most rows in a granny, at least until it gets to be too big, is find those 4 corner spaces and pull them out so that I can really see that square starting. So you've got 4 distinct shells, you've got 4 distinct corners, and of course there's your center. So after row 1, especially if you're brand new to making grannies, it's a great idea to lay it down, find your corners, pull them out, and you can see that square. And that also helps kind of give it a bit of shape going forward. So that way you can sort of see what you're doing and where you're working. So I'm going to put my hook back in here. All right. I love to start every single row in a corner space. It makes it really easy to figure out where you're at and also to kind of keep track of the shells you're doing. So in order to get to the next corner space, instead of flipping our work, we're just going to slip stitch across those 2 double crochets there. So we're just going to loosely slip stitch. 1, 2, that's slip stitching across the 2 double crochet, and then right into that corner space, and 3. So you've slip stitched across to the corner space, and now you're all ready to start. Every row begins with a chain 3. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet. It's also the same height as a double crochet. It's another reason we chain 3. And we're going to finish all the work that goes into a corner to start with. So if the chain 3 counts as a double crochet, we're going to work 2 more double crochet into that corner space to complete our first shell.
We have a new member joined.
Ta-da!
Isla Brown or Isla Brown?
Probably Isla.
Probably Isla.
I'm going to go with Isla. Thank you, Isla. Welcome to the family. So 3 double crochet, which one of them is a chain 3. That's the first shell. You can pull it back a little bit if you feel like the space that you want to work into is kind of getting crowded.
What letter is the 8mm hook?
There is actually no, I don't know if it's is it considered an L or an 11? It might be.
An L or an 11?
Off the top of my head, yeah, I'm going to say an L or an 11. I know that's in the same ballpark. It might not be exactly the 8mm, but that's a size you can aim for if you're looking for one in your collection.
We have another new member. Welcome, Lori.
Hi, Lori. Welcome to the family. Just going to get a sip of my juice here. All right. Because we're working in a corner, we want to make sure we create a corner. So we chain 2, Chain 2 always equals a corner space. We're not done in this space yet. We want to work 3 more double crochet into it because every corner space gets the same treatment. And if you've made a granny square with me before, you know the term shell, chain 2, shell. So every corner space gets shell, chain 2, shell, or 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet.
We had a question earlier.
Sure.
A little off topic, but what is the best, you know, the primrose stitch we did, what's the best border for that?
Oh, golly, there really isn't a best border. It depends on what you want your blanket. If you want your blanket's border to be really fancy, you can go with a really fancy border. If you don't want to take away from the pretty stitch of your blanket, you can do something super simple as a couple rows of single or half double crochet all the way around. When I completed my primrose stitch border, I just continued with the primrose stitch all the way around the outside. So I did a row of the shell, and then I did a row of the little picot stitch, and then I did a row of the shell and a row of the picot stitch, basically until I ran out of yarn. And I liked the way that looked too. It continued the same pattern around the edge, but because it was being worked around the edge, it looked kind of different. And you can do the same thing in the corners. So when you're on a shell row, work shell, chain 2, shell in the corners. And when you're on a picot row, work the little picot stitch, 2 of them into the corners. And it works out really nicely. Okay, so once you want to leave a corner, I like to chain 1. One chain gives you a nice spacer. This is especially important when you're working with thick yarn or 2 strands like this one here. And it gives you a bit more space to work your successive shells into once we get up to different rows. So chain 1 as you leave your corner. The next space we're working into is another corner because this is only row 2. So you only have 4 spaces and all 4 spaces are corners. So every single corner gets shell, chain 2, shell. So that's 3 double crochet. I'm going to try to make sure I don't miss any of my strands here.
A few questions about the steps. So you want to do just a quick recap?
What like steps?
Well, the question here is what do I do after that? Question mark, chain 3.
So the chain 3 begins your row, and then you work 2 double crochet into the same space that you're in, and that completes your shell. I've got one more here. I'll just finish this and I'll show you where I'm at. So I'm going to get my strand out of the way here. So here's your chain 3 that begins a row. You want to work 2 more double crochet all into the same space right where my finger is. So chain 3 equals a double crochet. Work 2 more double crochet into the same space. Chain 2. Work 3 more double crochet into the same space, and you can see that there is a corner created, and that's the first corner of row 2. You chain 1 when you leave so that you've got a nice little space for the next row where you're going to put a shell. And the next space you're working into, because all you do in grannies, all you do is work into spaces. So you're always looking for the next space. You're not looking for a stitch. You're always looking for the next space. So it does make it relatively easy to figure out where you have to work your stitches. So the next space on row 2 is a corner space because you only have corner spaces to work. So here's my little finger. So you work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, all into the same space. Every corner gets treated the same way. I'm going to put my hook back in here. Excuse me. As you're leaving, chain 1 so that you can create a nice little space along the edge for row 3. That'll be easier to see when we get there. You look for the next space. It's a corner space, and a corner space gets shell, chain 2, shell, or 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. So I'm going to work 3 double crochet, chain 2. Oops, try not to split my giant yarn here. Got a little tangle coming up. I better take care of that quickly. There we go. Sorry guys, I've got a little tangle in my yarn. There we go, almost gone. Aha! All right. Then to complete the corner, after you've chained 2, work 3 more double crochet into that same space. So shell, chain 2, shell, or 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. Aha, got that little knot. Thought I dealt with you. Come on. There we go. And that's the third corner, or the third, it's 3/4 of row 2 done, third corner. So shell, chain 2, shell worked into every single corner. Chain 1 before you leave, so you can create a nice little space hopping across the side of your square. Last corner, it's a corner space. We work 3 double crochet.
We have a super chat from Rinny.
Hi, Rinny. Thank you.
Hi, love you both. How many whips do you have, Jayda?
Right now, none. This is the biggest project I'm working on right now. It's a current project. I don't have any whips on the go because I have decided this year that I'm going to work on one thing at a time and try to get it done. So this is really the only, if you could call this a work in progress, this is the only real work in progress I've got going on right now. I've been making these double-stranded granny squares for a little while because I wanted to put together another blanket. So really, that's the only one I've got going.
Speaking of blankets, we have this written pattern available in the Etsy shop.
Yes, yes, we do. We've got a pattern written up in our Etsy shop. It's on how to make the double-stranded granny square. It includes how to put together an easy blanket, how to split up your yarn so that you get this beautiful sort of bold color effect. It talks about using variegated solid colors, how to put on a border, how to join them all. We've got 3 different methods of how to join them. A nice simple border you can do that looks really cute. In fact, I put that border on this one right here. And yeah, so that's up in our Etsy shop if you wanted to check it out. It's another nice one to have in your repertoire. It's one of my favorite patterns for sure.
So I put the link in the chat if anyone's interested. And we have a super chat from Elle. Elle is bombarding us with super chats today.
Thank you, Elle.
So Elle says, just bought assorted Lion brand homespun variegated yarns just for this project.
Ooh, oh my gosh. Oh,
eight skeins for $10.
Oh my gosh, that's a mega deal.
10 buns.
That's expensive.
Are trying to figure out how to hold on. The buns are trying to figure out how to hold. They want to crochet too.
They want to crochet too.
They could use their ears.
Either that or they're like, well, maybe this would make a nice little nest.
They've got long ears. They can.
I bet you they do that thing where they line them all up and flop it.
Oh yeah, this would make a nice.
This would make a nice flop spot. Oh my goodness. Okay. We have finished row 2 almost. So there's 4 corners given to us in row 1. So there's only 4 spaces to work for row 2. Every corner space gets shell, chain 2, shell. You chain 1 before you leave. And since I've just worked my last shell, chain 2, shell, I have to chain 1 before I close up my row. And you do that by finding the chain 3 you began with, find the top of it, and stick your hook in there and slip stitch to join. And same thing at the end of row 2. I like to do the same thing I did at the end of row 1. Lay it down flat, find those 4 corners, pull it out, and that helps not only form your square, it gives it like, be rough with it if you have to. You can really stretch it out. It's your work. It's not going to harm it. And that helps shape the square. You can really see that square happening now. It's not round. It's not ovular. It's a nice big square. And that's the end of row 2. Row 3, same thing. We want to begin our row in a corner. And if you follow this pattern, every single row will end 2 stitches just before a corner space. So when you join every row, if you're going to continue, you just want to slip stitch across those 2 double crochet and into the corner. Try to keep your double crochet, or I should say your slip stitches nice and loose. You don't want to make them too tight. And don't worry because they really don't show. That's the slip stitches from the previous row, but you can barely tell they're there, especially with this crazy variegated yarn. Gosh, I really like how that's coming together. That's really pretty. Okay, so we're in a corner space. That's where I like to start. A corner requires shell, chain 2, shell. In order to start the row, we have to chain 3. A chain 3 counts as a double crochet. So you can work 2 more double crochet into that corner space. And that will be the first shell of row 3. Excuse me. And there it is. Chain 2 to create the corner space. And before you leave that big space, maybe pull back on that shell so that you give yourself a little more space to work. Work 3 more double crochet into it.
Oh, we have a super chat from Killafu.
Hey, Killafu, thank you.
Killafu says, hi to you both. I have been having problems with joining the granny squares together. Any suggestions?
Well, my favorite way to join granny squares, it's not fancy, but it's just to sew them. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to get nice and close to the camera here. I'm going to try not to move too much. Now, these are double-stranded grannies. So I've double-stranded my sewing as well. I've got 2 strands of yarn here going here. And you just put your 2 squares together. So let's say I was going to join these 2. I'm going to take the right sides of both and put them together. And I always grab the spaces. So I line them up and I go from space to space. And I know that there's 3 double crochets between each space. So I would join my yarn in the 2 chains that are just to the edge of the first double crochets. And I would find the first set of double crochet stitches, the second set of double crochet stitches, the third set of crochet stitches, and then I know I should have a space. So both of these should be lined up, and I can sew through the chain that runs across that space. And then I address the next set of 3. And I just go from set to set to set, whether I'm sewing or single crocheting them together or slip stitching them together. That way I keep those 2 squares in alignment and I don't end up with this happening. So that I start all right, but then maybe one's too far or one's, they don't quite line up. Sort of look for those little groups. So do each shell at a time. And I find that really, really helps. And then because I sewed it, there's a little bit of give. So when I finally wash and block or steam block the blanket, everything has a lot more maneuverability. So there's a lot more sort of give, and it gives the blanket a little more stretch. So I like the way that looks. And of course, this is a scrap blanket, so I've just used any old darn colors I wanted when I stitched it together. But I think it looks really nice. It kind of has like a shabby chic kind of look to it. So that's my favorite way. I find it's the easiest way to join grannies. It's maybe not the fastest, but it also uses up the least amount of yarn. So if you're worried about not having a lot of yarn left over for a project, sewing is definitely my favorite way to go. I hope that helps. Excuse me. Okay, we have completed the first corner of row 3. Before we leave, we have to chain 1. We look for the next space and it's on the side. So it's running along the side. This little space here is a chain 1 space. Chain 1 spaces that run along the sides of our squares only get a single shell. So that's only 3 double crochet. 3 double crochet. Now row 3 can trip up some people, especially if they're in the habit of working shell, chain 2 shell. You don't want to work shell, chain 2 shell into every single space because you're going to end up with sort of an odd shape. It certainly won't be a square. So after you work your first corner in row 3, find the next space, work 1 shell, so only 3 double crochet, chain 1, and if you feel a little nervous, just put it down, find the 4 corners from row 2, lay it out flat, maybe find that corner space you created in your first corner, just tug it out, and you'll see your square is still square. The next space you're working with, after you've chained 1, is now a corner, and all corners get treated the same. It's shell, chain 2, shell. So we're going to work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet into that next corner space. Excuse me. Oh, I got a little bit of a tangle here.
We have a super chat from Catherine.
Hey, Catherine, thank you.
And Catherine says, Ellie the dog is watching happily.
Aww, hi, Ellie.
And she barks hi to us both.
Aww.
Hi, Ellie.
Aww.
Hi, Ellie. What you doing, Ellie?
Ellie's getting ready for her weekend, too. I hope you guys have all got a nice weekend ahead of you. I don't know what the weather's going to be like everywhere, but we were told it might actually get up to 17 degrees Celsius today, which is awfully exciting for us. It's going to rain, but I'll take the 17
That's like
degrees.
tropical weather.
That's
for
totally
us.
tropical.
17.
Woohoo! That's like t-shirt weather. Okay, I finished my second corner of row 3. That's 3 double crochet, chain through, 3 double crochet. Remember to chain 1 before you leave. We're on the second side of our square, and the next space we're going to work is a single chain 1 space. Chain 1 space gets 1 shell. So that's 3 double crochet into the chain 1 space. Excuse me. Chain 1 before you leave. Flatten it out if you feel you need to. Stop for a moment, pause, look for that next space. It's a corner space. So we're going to work shell, chain 2 shell into that corner space. All corner spaces get treated the same way. This will be the third corner in row 3.
We have a nice little comment from Jennifer here.
Hi, Jennifer.
Jennifer says, Jayda, I love watching your videos. I watch one every morning while I drink my coffee.
Oh my gosh.
Even if I have seen them before, they are inspirational. I love all your cute designs.
Aww,
thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hey, a little coffee and crochet in the morning. That's a nice way to start the day.
Or a lot of coffee and crochet.
Or a lot of coffee and crochet. That just makes a great day in general.
That sounds good.
So there was corner number 3 of row 3. 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet. Remember to chain 1 before you leave. You want to make that chain 1 spacer for the upcoming row. The next space is just a chain 1 space. It's along the side of our square. It gets 1 chain space, gets a 1 shell. So if it's a 1 chain space, think 1 shell. Only 3 double crochet. Remember to chain 1 before you leave. The next space is a corner. It's also the last corner we're going to work in our third row. All corners get treated the same. Shell, chain 2, shell. I really like these 2 bluish variegated yarns together. I think this is one of the, oh yeah, it's such a watery looking square. I really like that. I like it when you giggle. I don't know what you're giggling at.
Daniel's making me laugh.
Oh.
He wants me to bring out the harmonica next time.
You could, technically. Not that either of us are that great at it, but.
And then he's suggesting popcorn is one of the next snacks. We're talking a lot about snacking here popcorn in the chat. I think everyone's hungry. It is lunch.
It is lunch. All right, I've worked the last corner of row 3. So I've got a chain 1 before I leave. That leaves 1 last space, and it's a space along the side. Chain 1 space gets 1 shell. So 3 double crochet into that last space. Row 3 is probably the trickiest row. So if you've made it all the way through row 3, pat yourself on the back because the rest is smooth sailing. Remember, after you finish that shell, to chain 1 more before you finish. You're back at the beginning. That's that first shell you created. It started with a chain 3. Find the top of it, stick your hook in there, and slip stitch to join. If it's still not too big, lay it flat, find your 4 corners, and pull it out. That will help keep the square shape going. Makes it easier to tell where you are. And of course, you can see your progress, which is super important. And that looks like a square to me.
That's looking nice.
I like that. I like those blues.
Yeah.
Have a little sip of my juice here. All right. We're going into row 4. So row 4 and row 5, all the rows after this is pretty much sort of the same thing over and over again. Every row increases by 4 shells. I know that sounds kind of hard to believe, but it's true. So only 4 shells are increase each row, and you're only going to increase by 4 chain 1 spaces. So an easy way to remember it is row 1 has 4 shells. Row 2 has 8 shells. Row 3 has 12 shells. Row 4 has 16 shells. So you always multiply the row you're on by the number 4, and that should give you the number of shells you have. Row 2, 2 times 4, 8. Row 3, 3 times 4, 12. If nothing else, crochet will really sharpen your math skills. All right, so we want to start our rows in a corner space. In order to get across to the corner space, we're going to slip stitch across those 2 stitches. So every row begins the same way. I've got a little bit of a catch up here with my yarn. What's going on? There we go.
The internet squirrels.
The internet squirrels are tangling.
They're coming out into our reality.
That's entirely possible. We're going to slip stitch across those 2 stitches and find that hole, slip stitch right into the space. Now we're in a corner, and now we can start row 4 and start it like every other row. Chain 3 and complete the stitches that belong in a corner space. So 2 more double crochet to complete that first shell. So chain 3, work 2 double crochet into that corner space, like that. If you have to, grab the shell and tug it back a little bit to give you a little more room to work. Chain 2, because that chain 2 becomes the corner space for the next row. And I'm going to just try to untangle this yarn. I don't know what's going on here. Can you grab that and pull? Just pull. Yeah. There we go. Keep pulling. Thank you.
That's going to be quite a knot when you get to it.
No, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah, just yeah. All right, 3 more double crochet need to go into that space because we have to finish the corner before we move on, so that we have shell, chain 2 shell worked into the first corner. So you're always beginning with a corner. That's kind of an easy thing to remember. Slip stitch across to the corner space and complete a corner before you go. Every row begins with a chain 3. Complete that first shell with 2 more double crochet. Chain 2 for the corner space. Work 3 more double crochet all into that same corner space. Chain 1 before you leave, and off we go.
We have a super chat from, I'll let you guess. Bunny Mummy?
From Bunny Mummy. Thank you, Al.
We have a super chat from Al. And Al said a second granny at the last stitch of the first granny. The Buns have a step sibling now. Stray cat who adopted us.
Aww.
And he is finicky.
Hmm.
And he is finicky water.
Finicky water?
Yeah. Is that a name?
I don't know. Is he just finicky about water?
Maybe he's finicky about water.
So the question was, can you start another granny square?
Can you start a second granny at the last stitch of the first granny?
The last stitch of the first granny. Okay, I'm going to say no, because grannies work from the center out. You can certainly join them, though. So, for example, if I wanted to join this granny to this granny, I'd have to make it first up to the second last row. And as I worked my 5th row, I could join it in all of the little spaces. So I can join them as I go, but I can't necessarily start one on the last stitch because they start from the center out. So you're going to get some kind of, if you do that, I'm not saying you can't, but if you do that, you are going to get a very interesting kind of, probably going to look a bit like sea coral shape, because they're going to be all kind of twisted and tied into each other. That actually might be kind of an interesting experiment. All right, we've left the corner. Elle has me thinking about all sorts of interesting things here. We look for the next space, and the next space is a chain 1 space. And you'll see that there's 2 across each side. So every single row increases by an extra chain 1 space on each side, or by 4 chain 1 spaces altogether. So in row 3, you only had 1. In row 4, you're going to have 2. In row 5, you're going to have 3, and so on, and so on, and so on. Every little chain 1 space gets treated the same. It only gets 1 shell. So you work 3 double crochet into it. You chain 1 before you leave. And then you look for the next space, which of course in this case is another chain 1 space. So it gets treated exactly the same way. You work 3 double crochet into it, or 1 shell. Chain 1 before you leave. So now you've got the corner that you began with, a single shell in each of those chain 1 spaces. The next space you find or you come to is going to be a corner, and a corner gets treated like every other corner before. You work shell, chain 2, shell into it.
We have a super chat from Emily.
Emily, hi, Emily.
And Emily asked, if you don't mind me asking, what brand and what are the names of the yarns you are using? I absolutely love how they flow together.
Not at all. Every single one of the variegated yarns you see on this table, so not the ones in the blanket, but all of these guys, every single one of them, these all happen to be Red Heart Comforts. Now, they don't have names. They only have die lot numbers. So that's kind of boring and difficult to remember. But they are all Red Heart Comfort. So I think maybe we're going to shove them out of the way because I think that was too much for the computer to consider.
The camera was going, ah!
I'm just going to grab a label. So I've got this one here. So if you've never seen the Red Heart Comfort label, it looks like this. Red Heart Comfort, they're typically really big balls of yarn. I've got tape on this one because I was keeping it small. So 340 grams or a 12-ounce ball, that's a doozy. And of course, they come in solid colors, but they also come in these really pretty variegateds. And I seem to see the same variegated ones on offer for several years at a time. So they may not all be available where you shop, but they probably aren't discontinued because I'd say they're probably a pretty popular thing. So Red Heart Comfort, the variegated series, they don't have names, just die lot numbers, but they're really pretty. So I got on a spree years ago of buying a whole lot of them because I just couldn't resist their pretty colors. So that's what I'm using today, Red Heart Comfort. And I just want to say too, the variegated comforts are a little thinner than the regular comfort. So you might find the regular comfort yarn, while it's still classified as a medium or a size 4, it's a little thicker than the Super Savers, but the variegated yarns tend to be on a little thinner. So they work really, really well with solid Super Saver yarns because they're all relatively the same size. So that happy hunting if you go looking for those. Those are really, and you should be able to find them because I still see them out there and I still see, color combinations that I bought years ago. So I hope that helps. We've worked our second corner of row 4. So shell, chain 2 shell. Make sure you chain 1 before you leave. The next 2 spaces are chain 1 spaces. So they get 3 double crochet plus a little chain 1 each. So you work 3 double crochet into the space. And before you leave, you chain 1 for a spacer. So there's 3 double crochet, chain 1 before you leave, and 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space. All right. So there's the second shell. So shell, 1 shell in a chain 1 space, chain 1, 1 shell in a chain 1 space, chain 1. The next space we come to is a corner space, and we all know the drill. It's shell, chain 2 shell. And I really like these 2 yarns together. I think they're pretty. Gonna make me giggle, and I don't even know why.
Elle made me laugh because someone was asking if we're still live. And I said, yes, still live. And then Elle says, stethoscope to the screen. Yep, still live.
Yep, beep, beep. Still got a heartbeat. Beep, beep. There is corner number 3. Before we leave, we chain 1. And of course, every side is the same in a square. So you've got 2 more spaces before you get to the next corner. These are chain 1s. Chain 1 spaces only get 3 double crochet or a single shell in them. Remember to chain 1 before you leave, because you want to create that nice little space so that when you're working these big, thick shells on successive rows, they've got somewhere to sit. They're not going to be all squeezed in and tight.
Texan73 says, hello to all from literally all over the world.
Well, hello, yes.
And we say the same.
Yeah, hello from Canada.
We have people that have said hello from all over the U.S. and even down as far as Brazil.
Hey. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Is Brazil in the same time zone as us? If you're in Brazil, can you let us know? Are they a little more of the...
I'm not really sure.
Because it gets narrow down there, right?
Yeah.
Brazil seems like it's really far away. Although we could drive there, technically.
We could.
That's cool. My gosh, this is a big chunk of rock. All right, so I've just finished the third side of row 4. We've come to the last corner space. That's going to be our last corner. So shell chain 2 shell into that last corner, and then we're going to work the home stretch, which is the 4th side of row 4.
Oh, there's a hello from Alberta, from Sweden, from the Netherlands.
Oh my goodness.
Australia.
Oh, is it early or late there?
What are they, like a...
Almost 24 hours ahead of us,
No, but
right?
it's more than that. It's like 26 or something.
Got another little knot here. There we go.
Norway, Belgium.
Oh my goodness.
Red Deer.
Oh, I've been to Red Deer.
Missouri. Behave today.
Yeah, it's really giving me a tough time. Sorry, everybody. I'm just fiddling with another knot here. Off camera. This is
I'll take over the
You're
tutorial.
gonna take over the tutorial.
So you go like this, and then voila, whack. See how fast I crocheted that?
You did that really quickly.
Camera tricks.
Camera tricks. Where did that go? Ah, I see. All sorts of issues going on here. All right.
I'm telling you, it's the internet squirrels. They've left the internet and they're in the craft room.
Okay, I'm gonna put that back. I've got an end that shouldn't be there. Look at this.
It's one of those little nasty yarn critters.
It's what did we call it? The yarn beast or something?
There were a lot of names.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm back. Where was I? Okay, I'm finishing my corner.
Oh, we're getting all kinds of times in here. 5:45 in the UK PM. Almost 3 a.m. in Australia.
Oh my goodness, Super. That is
in the Netherlands. It's 18:47. So what's that? 6:47 p.m.
Lovely.
We have a super chat from Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you.
Lynn did not give us her time zone.
She didn't give us her time zone. Thank you, Lynn.
We have another one. This is AZ, Arizona.
Arizona. Okay.
So 9:47 a.m.
Oh.
And Vegas is the same time.
Oh.
12:47 in North Carolina, 12:47 in Connecticut.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad everybody was able to pop in and join us.
5:47 in the UK. This is neat. Thanks everyone for sharing.
All right, just before we close off row 4, I'm just going to show you what I just finished doing. So there was our last corner, shell, chain 2 shell, chain 1 before you leave. All of the little chain 1 spaces get a single shell each. Make sure you chain 1 in between everything. Unless it's a corner, then you want 2 chains. Chain your last chain before you close it off. Find the top of your chain 3. Stick your hook in there and slip stitch to join. So if it's getting kind of big, you can lay it down, hold it with one hand, and pull out the 4 corners with your finger or your thumb. And that, again, it kind of helps keep that nice square shape going. It helps keep it stretched so that if you tend to crochet a little tightly, which is possible when you're dealing with a big hook and 2 strands of yarn, because it's not sort of something you do all the time, you might find that your tension's a little tighter. So it helps to finish every single row and just tug it back into shape so that you can still see your square coming together and you don't lose sight of where your corners are. If you're brand new to this and you find keeping track of your corners is tricky, I recommend putting a stitch marker or a safety pin in all 4 of your corners so that you know when you get there, you know what to do in it, and you won't accidentally work a corner into one of those other spaces before you get to the actual corner.
We have another super chat from Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you.
I think that's 2 in a row. I have to go up the chat to check. Yes. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Lynn. All right, we're going to start row 5. We are going to slip stitch across those 2 double crochet that are between where we finished the row and the corner space that we want to start our next row in. So nice and loosey-goosey. A couple of nice, easy-going slip stitches across those 2 stitches. Try not to make them too tight, and then slip stitch right into that space. That puts you in the corner space. That sets us up for row 5. Every row begins the same way. Chain 3. Chain 3s count as a double crochet. They're the same height as a double crochet. So it brings you up to where you need to be working. And that's what it should look like every single time you start a row.
We have a super chat from Bunny Mummy.
Al.
And
thank you, Al.
Al says it's 11:45 a.m. here in Nashville.
Oh.
Merlin and Poppy Nose bump tails wagging to you.
Oh my gosh. That is so much cuteness.
Little stubby bunny tails.
You should tell them about the rabbit action we've had in our backyard today. They've been all it's springish here, so of course there's all these rabbits chasing each other around in the backyard.
Oh my goodness, when they chase each other and bounce.
It is so cute. They do this, and one of them runs at the other and the other one jumps high in the air.
We had something interesting happen this morning.
Yeah.
We had what was that large
a fisher.
A fisher showed up in our backyard.
We've never seen one
seen one before. I was like, is that a raccoon? No, wait, is that a bear? What is that?
What is that?
It's a lot bigger than a raccoon. And boy, were the rabbits
they
ever freaked out.
That's because I think
and then we found out, we looked it up and found out that they eat rabbits.
Yes. No wonder they were freaked out.
Yeah, they go after all the little critters in your backyard.
So I kind of hope he was just passing through.
A fisher.
Mm-hmm.
He was furry.
He was big and furry. Okay, so we've begun row 5. We've chained 3 to begin. You work 2 more double crochet into that corner space. That gives you the shell that begins the row. Chain 2. If you have to, you can pull back on that shell just to give yourself a little more space and work 3 more double crochet into that space before you leave because you want to complete your corner. So every row is identical from here on out. You're just adding 1 more shell per side as you go. So every corner is always the same. You always have 4 chain 2 corners. Every single corner is a shell, chain 2 shell. You always want to chain 1 before you leave your shell. And you just end up working more single shells across the side. So we've got 3 single shells on each side now. And each of those shells is 3 double crochet. If you come across a chain 1 space, it only gets 1 shell. So that's something you want to keep in your mind too, if you're brand new to working on granny squares. Always chain 1 before you leave. That creates the space for the next row. And continue. This is really pretty, these 2 blues together. I'm sort of getting mesmerized by the dark blue and then the pretty white and then that nice turquoise that sort of sits next to the green. All right. There are the 3 single shells that run across the side. The next space I come to is a corner space. Shell, chain 2, shell into the corner space. Oh, my yarn's threatening to knot on me again. Oh, I got it. Never mind. All right. And there's the shell, chain 2 shell. Always chain 1 before you leave. So that's corner number 2 of row number 5 done. So here's the first corner. Here's the second corner. The next 3 spaces are all chain 1 spaces all the way across. So they all get 3 double crochet each or 1 shell.
We have a super chat that came in, and we have a new member that joined. Goodness. So welcome to our new member, Dana.
Hi, Dana. Welcome to the family.
And the super chat is from T's Crafty Creation.
Hey, T's. How's it going? Thank you.
And T says, hi, Jayda. I have yet to do any granny squares. Watching while I am grooming my fur babies at work.
Aw. Oh, my gosh.
That's cute.
Grooming. That's got to be a Zen activity. I mean, unless they're really anti-grooming. Mr. InStitches has a cat that does not like being in that what's that thing? Kind of like a little harness that you put them in. Groomers.
The groomers put them in the harness. Like there's a bit of a tub.
Yeah.
Does not like that.
She kind of has a freak out.
I think freak out is an understatement.
Poor Oofy. Aw. All right, I'm across side 2. So same as side 1, there's 3 single shells that run along the side. Each shell is separated by a chain 1. chain 1 before you get to your last corner space on that side. Because it's a corner, you work shell, chain 2, shell. So I'm taking my time, and all of you who are new to working granny squares should be taking your time too. But as you know, the more often you work something, the quicker you tend to get at it. So I'm not saying you need to speed through granny squares. You should always try to enjoy the process. But this will become a very familiar pattern, and it will get quicker and quicker the more you work on them. And because we're holding 2 strands together throughout, and we're using a big hook, and if you use an even bigger hook, they'll come together even quicker, they grow really fast. So these are really big squares, but they're only 5 rows each. And a typical little square, let me see if I've got one here. Oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, 5. So here's also 5 rows, but it's made with 1 strand of yarn and a smaller hook. So 1, 2, 3, actually this is just 4 rows, but so a 5-row granny would be a little bit bigger. But you see how tiny that is compared to one using 2 strands and a big hook. So it's, gosh, it is easy to make a scrap blanket relatively quickly using this method. And it's so pretty. You get an effect of color unlike anything else you could possibly buy in a single ball because you're mixing all these colors together yourself. And it's going to be different every single time. Another reason I love it.
Have a super chat from A Prim Bun.
A Prim Bun. Thank you. I like that. A Prim Bun. I'm picturing a prim bunny.
A prim bunny.
Or possibly a very prim bun
Primped
hairstyle. I like that bun hairstyle, sort of like a ballerina. Excuse me.
It's good that you put you compared the little granny square because it really showed on video the difference.
The difference, yeah. It's the same pattern, but it can change so much depending on the size of the yarn, the size. Excuse me, Elle just made me think of something actually. If you want, try making a granny square using crochet thread and a small steel hook. That will be a tiny little thing, but it's the easiest way to make a very basic thread doily. So you use the same granny square pattern, but you just use crochet thread and a small steel hook. And it's a great exercise in working tiny, but my goodness, it make a tiny little granny square. I'm just working on my last corner. I got to that relatively quickly. While sitting here discussing rabbits and cute things. Oh, I think I hear the rain starting. We're supposed to get thunderstorms all afternoon, which I am so excited about because that to me is like a big sign that the spring is finally here.
It means warmth.
It means warmth. It means green grass. I'm so excited. Everything's been brown for so long. Just going to grab a sip of water here.
How many squares? Are you asking how many squares Jayda has on the table here?
I've got quite a few.
Or how many squares to make the blanket?
You know what? Let me just put this one aside for a second, and I'm going to bring my blanket back on here. So this is the blanket that I made. This one is only 9 squares. Oh my gosh, this thing is so darn pretty. This is a 9 square blanket. So I'm going to try not to move it too much.
The camera's having
I got it.
having a meltdown.
So 9 squares. 9 squares and a simple little border. I sewed them together, and this is a great size for your lap if you're sitting in a wheelchair. And it's almost, it's 72.5 centimeters one way and the other. So it's inches. So it's pretty big. Or it's getting there, maybe 28 and a half inches. So that's just 9 squares. And if you put all of the ones that I've currently got here, and I mean, let me see, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I have 14. So I've already almost completely doubled the blanket that I've got sitting here. 4 more and it'll be double the size. And these literally took no time at all to make because once you get used to the pattern, they come together so quickly because of the size of the hook and the double yarn. So great stash buster. I've been so happily using up lots of my variegated yarns and lots of my sort of leftover balls of, doesn't matter at all. This one looks really Eastery. This one looks like if you pulled back from a Monet painting, like a Monet garden painting, my goodness, that looks exactly like what I'd see in the garden. I love it. I love how they all work out.
We have a super chat that came in. Actually, we have two that popped in.
Oh my.
One is from Crystal.
Crystal, thank you.
And the other is from Melissa.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it.
Melissa asks, can you show an example of crochet thread?
Yes, I certainly can. Give me 1 second here. I'm just going to finish this little double crochet. I'll race over to my crochet thread basket. I have a couple of different, let's see. Here, very fine crochet thread. So thread is often sold in these sort of spools. This is a very fine thread. It almost is the same thickness as an embroidery floss, even thinner. This is a size 10 or 30. I can't remember because I've lost my, I've lost the label. But the bigger the number in crochet thread, the finer the size. So that's a size 10 or 30. I have a size 3 here somewhere. That's a 10. Let me see. That one's a little thicker. So it's label on. So this is an Aunt Lydia's. This is a very common one that I find around. Fashion is also kind of a reference to the size. It's a 3, and it's here. And I'm just going to hold these two side by side. These are both cotton. There you go. You can sort of see the size difference there. I hope it's not too blurry. The super white is really, really thin, and the slightly thicker. So this is a size 10, not a 30. This is a size 10, and this is a size 3. So the smaller the number in crochet thread, the bigger the thread. Whereas in yarn, the smaller the number in yarn, the thinner the thread. So it's sort of the opposite as it is to yarn. But that is what crochet thread looks like, and that's typically how it comes bundled. I hope that helps. Thanks for asking. I'm on the home stretch here of our 5-round granny square. I've got one more shell to work because the last space is a chain 1 space. So I'm going to work 3 more double crochet into it.
Alicia asks, can you do a continuous join granny tutorial? I don't mean join as you go, a continuous join.
Continuous join.
Granny.
Is that like the never-ending granny? I think it's kind of like
where you just keep going around.
You've got multiple rows going around and around. Yeah, I haven't done one of those, so that I'm gonna write that down. I think it's got a few names. So like a never-ending or a continuous granny. Yeah, it's I think that's chain. I find the top of that chain 3 that I began with. Ram my hook in there and slip stitch to join. So there is a 5-row granny. It is a monster. If I take my measuring tape, it's about 8.5 inches across, or if you use the metric system, about 21.25 centimeters. So 8.5, 21.25 centimeters. This is not blocked. It hasn't been sewn into a project yet. So there's still going to be a little more give after that happens. I am going to finish it here. If you were going to continue, you would just slip stitch across to the corner, chain 3, finish your corner. And of course, every time you come to a chain 1 space, you work 1 shell. Make sure you put little chain 1s in between. Every corner gets treated the same way, and you could basically make this square as big as you wanted. But when you're finished, like I am, grab your yarns and your scissors, and you snip those yarns. Give yourself a nice long tail. You want to make sure you cut them both. Fasten off by pulling them both back through that loop on your hook. Tug it nice and tight. And then you can weave it in. So this is where that yarn needle with the big eye comes in handy. And this is something, weaving in your tails changes depending on the pattern that you've just worked. So I like to look for the most sort of bunched up stitches, and that happens to be a bunch of them here in this corner. So I flipped it over. I'm just going to run my needle underneath a piece of a stitch so that I get down to the bottom of where these sort of stitches are all grouped. Then I'm going to run my needle underneath them. Remember not to pull too tightly because you don't want to pull anything out of alignment.
We have a new member.
Hey.
Welcome to Corinne.
Hi, Corinne. Thanks for joining the family. Once you've gone one way, you can take your yarn needle, hop over top of a piece of one of those stitches and run them back through the same stitches. Remember not to pull too tightly. And if you kind of want to leave the corner, you can continue to weave it down through other stitches. So all you basically want to do is weave your tails in back and forth several times. Keep going back and forth across each other because that's what helps lock them into place. So I'm just going to come down here to another stitch. Another nice thing about using all these variegated yarns is that you just won't see those little tails. I'll weave them under these ones. And then I'm going to hop over top and weave them back across the same ones.
We have another super chat.
Oh my goodness.
From Teddy.
Hi, Teddy. Thank you so much.
Teddy says, hi, Jayda. I have been crocheting for less than a month, and I love your videos.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I am currently working on your split shell stitch wrist warmers.
Ooh, very nice. Well, thanks for finding us, and we hope that you enjoy your crochet journey. We're glad that you were able to start it with us. If you've got little tails left over after you've finished weaving them all in, you can just trim them up. And that is that. A big 5-row granny square made with double strands held together. Like I said before, I used an 8mm hook. I think this is also known as an L or an 11, but you can use any size hook that you're comfortable with. So a bigger hook to make looser stitches, especially helpful if your tension is tight. A smaller hook to make tighter stitches, especially if your tension is loose. And you're going to get, as long as you use the same hook size throughout, all of your squares will be relatively the same every single time. That was my 15th square. I have 3 more to make. And then I'll have a nice big blanket. Oh, and it's going to be so warm because this double thickness it's really, really warm. Gotta get that done before the warm weather shows up. Oh my gosh, they're so pretty.
Catherine asks if the mug we have can be shipped to the UK. And I think, Catherine, I'm pretty sure that Teespring handles all of that. And I'm pretty sure that they have a production warehouse in Ireland. Oh, wow. So I think you just have to make sure that if you're going through the order process, coming from the European distribution center. But I'm not 100% the process of ordering from the UK or Europe, but I'm pretty sure that they do ship there. Oh, and we have another super chat.
Oh my goodness gracious.
From Melissa.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much. All right, I'm just going to lay out this pretty blanket all over again. We're just going to start wrapping it up here, everybody. So that's how you make a double-stranded granny square. We showed you 5 rows, but if you wanted to keep making them bigger, you totally could, because you just have to keep repeating the last row over and over and over again. The blanket you see in front of you here was made in the exact same method, but I used 2 solids most of the time. Some of these yarns are actually variegated, and I paired them up with another solid. But I was using up all of the little tiny tail ends that were in my small scrap bin. So my small scrap bin means it's a bit of yarn that isn't even enough to make a whole granny square on its own. It's a small amount. Lights and the brights, and the darks and the bolds. And I always run 1 strand from each pile alongside each other. And as one runs out, other one from that same pile, tie it in and keep going. And that's how you get this effect. The other method that we used that same color splicing method in, we've done it a couple times. We've done it with the Happy Scrappy Market Bag, and we've done it with our Scrap Gan, which was a color splicing Afghan we made that just used the half double crochet stitch. So super simple, absolutely gorgeous overall effect. I love how all of those mixed up mottled colors ended up working together. And the secret to get it to look so awesome is to run those light bright and a dark bold alongside each other all the time. And that's what makes the contrast stand out. Just to have a little sip of my water here.
Quinnell mentioned that I tried to super chat twice, but it never showed up.
Oh.
So I'm not really sure why that may have happened. It could be that you didn't click through the entire process, or
it could be internet squirrels,
or it could be that YouTube is just having issues right now with that system.
Our laptop, like our computer issues were odd this morning too. Like, and we weren't sure if it was the internet or if it was our software or a combination of both. So if you're having technical issues, don't worry, you're not alone. We had several today. If there's any other questions about the double strand granny square, please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, we're going to wrap things up here. I really hope you guys got a good solid idea of how to work a plain granny square pattern, but using 2 strands held together, and also how you might want to split up your yarns or combine your yarns in order to get this kind of effect. So I talked about using light brights and dark bolds for this blanket. I did the same. So I took my variegated yarns and I separated them into the same kind of categories. So one's the variegateds that were light or really bright in one category, and the variegateds that were dark or really bold in another category. And I got the same kind of thing. Our big beautiful basket is another example of mixing up variegated yarns together and the kind of overall really wild tweed effect you can get. Another project that I absolutely love how it turned out. I really don't think mixing any colors together can possibly give you a bad outcome. So I colors, spread them all out on the floor of the table, split them up into 2 categories, and just start going crazy, because you will get the most beautiful outcome when you do.
Okay, so I want to get to a couple of questions here.
Sure.
And also a big thank you to Nikki, super chat.
Thank you, Nikki.
Some are coming through, some aren't. I'm not really sure why.
Golly. It could just be internet squirrels.
It's got to be the internet. There's always issues with our internet. But the questions here. How did you get seams to hide yarn you used to connect the squares?
So these are the seams. So if you sort of take a close look here, you can see that those are the stitches. So I sewed my granny squares together on this particular blanket. And because I'm sewing them together, the seams are, and because there's so much color, this is a real color riot of a blanket, the seams kind of just blend into each other because there's kind of a circus of color going on. So if you're going to sew them together, it already makes your seams rather minimal. And if you're making something as bright and bold and as multicolored as this, then you're not going to sort of have your seams stand out too much. And it looks the same on either side. So there's one side of the seam. So there's the stitching on the seam there. That's one side. And then that's the exact same seam on the other side. So there's really not a lot of difference when you sew them together. And that's nice because then one side kind of looks like the other.
Mm-hmm. And before we wrap it up here, we have another super chat.
Oh my gosh.
From Tees Crafty Creations.
Thank you, Tees.
Have a great day.
Yes,
Tees,
you guys too. Thank you all so much for stopping into the craft room and spending some time with us here on a Friday. We hope it warms up where you are or cools down if you're hot. We hope that the day ends up being nice and crafty, and we hope you have a super creative weekend ahead of you. Do find some time to sit down and do a little creativity. It does wonders for your mood, especially if you've had kind of a trying week, if it was a really busy week. Make sure you set aside some time to be creative because it is great for your brain. And it's a nice way to unwind.
And someone asked, how did you tie in the yarn? That's probably from the beginning of the video.
Yeah, so if you're tying in yarns, and we have a video where we show that. We have a couple actually. So our Happy Scrappy Market Bag, we demonstrate tying in a whole new ball of yarn, the simple basic method. There's a lot of different ways to join yarn, but I use a quick method. So the Happy Scrappy Market Bag tutorial we did can show you how to tie in a yarn. And we do that pretty close to the beginning of the tutorial. You don't have to be wading into it too far. We also demonstrate that process in the Scrapgan, which is also where we show the yarns into 2 categories. So we go into that a lot more in depth if you want to check those out. We'll make sure those links are in the description box once this live stream becomes. So if you want to check out those further resources, absolutely, like we said, we've kind of covered some of this stuff before in the past, and with with a lot more focus on it. So we'll make sure those tutorials are in the description box and you can check them out. We also show this blanket off actually in that Scrapgan tutorial because I love it so much.
We have another soup from the bunny, Mommy.
Oh my goodness, Al. Okay, that is enough, Al. Thank you very much.
Al says the TARDIS roof, the roof is on fire.
Oh my gosh. Well, I hope not literally, but that is great if it's working out for you. Marvelous.
I think Elle wants help on the roof idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, wait. I do have a suggestion. Elle, have you seen our gingerbread tutorial? Because you could probably construct something in exactly the same way. We'll put that link in the description box too. It's our gingerbread house ornament. It's a 3D ornament and it has a roof, which I think you could probably obviously leave off the icing sugar icicles. Unless it's going to be a TARDIS you're going to hang on your tree. But you could probably use the same kind of concept to put a little roof on it. I think that would probably work. Yeah.
Give it a try.
Yeah, we'll put that link in the description box for you, Elle. Okay, guys, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Like we said, we'll put the further resources in the description box. Give us about 20 minutes after this video ends so that we can take care of all that extra processing. And have a wonderful weekend. Have a wonderful afternoon. And take care of each other. We're so glad you were able to spend some time with us. And yeah, stay safe, stay crafty, have an awesome weekend, and a great week ahead. We will see you guys really, really soon here.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.